welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. I've become Zane Simon, Phil. I realize I just rushed through the obligatory parts of the show now.
On that note...
Oh, yeah.
Moving swiftly on.
Oh, you didn't want to talk shit about Zane?
No, that's Zane things.
Does he
that's
say...
what he says. He says, on that note, moving swiftly on. And...
I'd never noticed moving swiftly on.
Odds.
Okay, he loves odds. He's like autistic or something. He's like obsessed with the numbers. I don't understand.
And all that good stuff.
This is now a Zane Simon fan show rather than a Zane Simon hate show. Apparently, we're just collecting his catchphrases. Anyway, boy, we're surrounded by good fights. I don't know what happens, but coming up next week is a sensationally good fight night card. Honestly, I feel like I'm being tricked. These things are so rare now. I feel like the football is going to be yanked away just as soon as I settle in to swing my leg. The chair is going to be pulled out from under me just as soon as I'm ready to sit down. Like, this upcoming Brazil card with Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira in the main event is too good. Basically, after the first 3 fights listed here, after that, every single fight on the card, and that means about, 10 matchups, are really, really good and interesting, or weird, or whatever. They're just worth seeing. That's a thing of beauty. Before we get into any of that, and we will be trying to cover a pretty extensive part of the undercard in addition to the main and co-main events, we are going to talk about last weekend's fights, though. UFC 248, I don't know how you felt about it, Phil. I thought it was a pretty good event. Even in the moment, I was quite intoxicated. I was hanging out with friends, the rare gathering to watch a pay-per-view kind of thing. And even live, I didn't hate the main event. But having sobered up, spent just about a half an hour after it ended, becoming just marginally more sober, I realized something. I'll never watch it again. You know, I watch it for analysis purposes. I will never do that thing where I just log on to Fight Pass like, I don't know what to do with myself. Maybe I'll watch one of my favorite fights. Never. I learned my lesson from Woodley Thompson.
I think you will watch it again for another reason.
Oh, well, that may be. It's very, very likely to be a Depressed Us feature for sure. God damn it. You're right.
I mean, that's going to be the bonus, is that at least we're going to be able to watch it again. It's going to be like Shevchenko, Nunez too. We're going to be like, and you didn't actually mind this fight, Connor, and then you can feel consumed with guilt.
This time at least I know. You know, I'm prepared. I think it's okay to enjoy something tense the first time. This is an experience you have with movies sometimes, right? A movie's full of tension. You watch it again the second time, and you're like, it actually wasn't as good as I thought. I was just wrapped up in it in the moment. So I think that's all right. It was a view it live kind of fight. If you didn't see it live, don't bother. It's not good. Let's be real. It was a huge, huge letdown. In fact, I applied some Lathe of Heaven powers on Twitter. The other day I was plugging my Adesanya Romero technique article, which if you haven't read, you might still want to read. It weirdly did not apply to the approach Adesanya took to this fight, but normally it makes a lot of sense, and I thought it was a good contrast between the two fighters. I was plugging that, and someone replied saying, you know, oh God, what was the initial comment? It was like, someone said he's going to, Adesanya is going to turn Yoel Romero into the Holly Holm to his Valentina Shevchenko. Now, I don't know how apt that comparison is. In fact, I would say probably not, but.
It's very weird.
Weird. But I said, as long as he doesn't turn him into, I thought this was a far more possible outcome at the time. As long as he doesn't turn him into the Wonder Boy to his Woodley, I'll be happy. And someone said, oh God, I hope that doesn't happen. I said, don't worry, friend. Calm yourself. The worst we get out of Adesanya is the Silva fight, and I enjoyed that one. I liked that fight. I thought it was fine. I'm okay with a more tactical battle if there are still meaningful things happening. I don't think he's going to go full Wonder Boy versus Woodley. And wouldn't you believe it, Phil? Israel Adesanya betrayed us. he did this specifically to make me look dumb on the internet. And how dare he? And, anyway, I want to let you talk about it. Give me your thoughts on the fight. First, I guess, let me know how you maybe think it should be scored. If there is really enough of a margin anywhere to decide that. Your feelings on the matchup as a whole. How it met or defied your expectations.
Yeah, I would score it 1 star and 2 thumbs down. I did not have strong feelings about the scoring for this fight, or in fact the co-main, but for radically different reasons.
Right.
The co-main, as I think I said before the show, the co-main was a fight where I felt like both of them won, and the main was a fight where I felt like both of them lost.
We agree that they should take the middleweight belt, cut it in half, and give 1 part each to Ioane and Jacek and Zhang Weili because they earned it.
Yep. Yeah, I was watching it with a couple of friends as well. I also had a gathering to watch the card, although it was obviously the next day because I'm not a lunatic who's going to be having a live get-together at 3 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And one of them was favoring Romero, one of them was favoring Adesanya, and the guy who favored Romero was really excited, like, during the fight for a long time, because he was just like, Romero's going to do something exciting. It's not going to be, and he was like, he'll be going, like, it's not going to be 3rd round Romero, it's going to be 5th round Romero. And then the 5th round came around, and he just got pretty quiet. Because Romero did start to do some stuff in the 5th round, but it was not a lot of stuff.
It was 25th minute Romero.
Yeah. And my other friend just quietly went onto Twitter after the fight and unfollowed Israel Adesanya. After unflatteringly describing him as either like the yawn bender or the snooze sender.
I'm not sure how graceful either of those nicknames are, but I appreciate the attempt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it wasn't a great fight. And it belongs in that particularly awful stretch of like terrible fights. It is unequivocally worse than, say, Shevchenko-Carmouche, because in Shevchenko-Carmouche, there is a clear winner.
Yeah.
You cannot blame Valentina Shevchenko for that fight because she's winning it easily.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good way to jump into discussing how this fight played out. Is the question of, was this a smart approach from Israel Adesanya? Now, before you scream no.
No!
Damn it. Yeah, I mean, I said I can sum up my thoughts. I'll just reference things happening on Twitter again, but I think I said, I never played chess, but people talk about it on MMA Twitter a lot. So what? It's some kind of staring contest or what?
Yeah.
Because that's the feeling you get, is there's always at least a small contingent of people who watch a fight like this and they have to like intellectualize it. Like, oh, in fact, this was a brilliant showing from Israel Adesanya. He mitigated all damage. I mean, granted, he's the only guy to come out of a Yoel Romero fight still like being a functioning human. That's a kind of win. You know, he came out of a Romero fight without taking a lot of damage, but also he maybe didn't win it. And I'm not being super contentious about the scores. Live, I scored it for Romero. I thought he got 1, 2, and 5 because almost nothing happened and he's the big power guy. Part of that was optical because at least I kind of expect that sort of fight out of Romero, and I don't expect it out of Adesanya. So live, it really felt like Adesanya was fighting Romero's fight. But even after the fact, he kind of was. Like, I don't think you can call it a smart performance when you allow the margins to be that thin. You know, take a cue from Jorge Masvidal. The man spent his whole career losing close decisions. It took him years to realize that sometimes the smartest thing to do is to hit the other guy really hard. Like, you gotta win the fight. And yeah, I don't think anyone can make a strong case for either guy winning this fight. And so it's impossible to call it a smart performance from either guy. The only thing is that is exactly what we expect from Yoel Romero. We would not, he's a smart fighter, but last week we hit pretty heavily on the fact that he is not a strategist. or at least there's only one strategy that he really performs well. And every time it is a gambit. So that's in his nature. For Adesanya, this was not a smart way to solve the puzzle of Yoel Romero. A half dozen decent low kicks around, it's just not enough.
Yeah, so there are ways to game decisions out of fighting systems. Like, there are ways to get ahead and be smart and win a fight. And these should be typically informed by history and the understanding of how people win fights and what judges are looking for.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to play a safety first offense titration type game where you're just neutralizing what the other guy does and just coming out on top, doing the whole Klitschko Fury type thing where you're edging every round reasonably clearly, enough so that you are confident. It blows my mind to think that people would be like, oh yeah, Israel Adesanya, he had the galaxy brain idea that he was going to exploit MMA judging tendencies by winning a close, contentious decision with low kicks.
Surely.
Very sporadic low kicks.
A strike that is famously regarded as easy to score, and judges around the world just love to score winners based on low kicks.
Yeah. Did he win this fight? Did he do more damage in this fight? Yes, he did. Like, did he gamble his entire championship on judges being awful? I mean, judges valuing something which they typically never value.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
You can't even say, did he gamble it on the judges being competent? Because I want to emphasize, I think a competent judge could have still given this to Yoel Romero.
Yeah.
The margins
were nightmarishly close.
Yeah, it was so thin. And if you were just like, well, Romero got outstruck, but he landed the biggest shot of that round, I'm going to give it to him, you would be perfectly justified in doing that, because on the other side of the scale is, at most, a dozen leg kicks. At most. So, let's talk about, like what could have gone better. The first thing I want to say is that Israel Adesanya needed to jab. For God's sake, he needed to jab. Yoel Romero came out with a very counter-oriented sort of game. And that clearly psyched Israel Adesanya out. Some people took umbrage with me saying this.
We were saying exactly the same thing.
What, that he was shook?
Yeah, that is precisely the words we used.
I'm not calling the man a coward. I'm just saying he was too anxious to exchange with Romero. That was very, very clear. After that,
you could tell when he came out. For the beginning of the fight, when they're both staring each other down and stuff, he never loaded his hand.
Yeah,
he never did the thing where he pulls down the shotgun gauge over his wrist, and thus he left himself completely unable to throw punches.
This is crazy, but there was someone, I think, in the YouTube comments of our last episode, maybe it was in the comments of, actually I think it was in the comments of my article, where someone said, this was some real galaxy brain shit at the time, but I think it has redeemed itself certainly more than Israel Adesanya's strategy for this fight, that the pre-fight stare down dance off got in Adesanya's head, that he thought he wanted to challenge Romero, saw him salsa dancing, was like, I can dance too, and then Romero just hit a standing backflip, landed 10 out of 10. And Adesanya was like, oh God, I can't just do that. And that honestly carries more weight now as a factor affecting this fight than whatever genius strategy Adesanya thought he was bringing into the cage. I don't know.
He had, so he since that first counter by Romero, but even, before then, he didn't, one of the things that we've praised for Adesanya is that he is a fighter who gradates his power.
Yeah.
And city kickboxing as well, in fact, in general. We'd look at Alexander Volkanovski. He showed as a far less seasoned striker, he had a masterclass in how to close down a counter-oriented striker, because he pushed he gradually pushed through feints, through to light connections, through to hard connections.
Yes.
He went up the gradient. And in this, Israel Adesanya is someone who gradates his power. He is at his best, he is a touchy, handsy. I think you mentioned he is a sticky puncher who feels his opponents, and I think this has contributed to him being a good MMA striker. And he clearly did not want to be touching Yoel Romero.
Yes.
Like, he tried to go from feints to hard strikes the whole time, and Yoel was simply too fast to bite on the feints, which meant that huge amounts of nothing went on.
Yeah, Volkanovski Aldo. I'm glad you bring that up. Like, same camp. That is a far better example of how to deal with a powerful, knockout-oriented counterpuncher.
One with extremely good reflexes.
Yeah. One who can trouble you with his defense as well, right? Like, that was a problem, is that Romero was not really taking a lot of shots. Romero is a pretty good defensive fighter. That's how he gets away with not doing anything for large portions of most of his fights. And Volkanovski, when faced with a very similar style matchup, without even having like Adesanya's reach advantage or anything, granted, maybe a more washed version of the athletic counterpuncher, but setting aside all the little minute differences, like, he built in that fight. He built the way Adesanya normally does. He started with lots of feints, exactly how Adesanya started in this fight. Lots of feints, try to get reactions. Whether or not those feints got reactions informed his next decision. That's the thing with feints, is that if the guy doesn't react to them, you can just do the thing he didn't react to. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of a feint. You're testing whether or not he's going to react. If he does react, then you have something in the chamber that capitalizes on the fact that he's worried about the thing you are feinting. If he doesn't, just do the thing and hit him in the face. It's beautiful. It is a completely a freeing way of approaching striking. And Volkanovski built beautifully against Aldo. Lots of feints. These turned into jabs. The jabs established the feints further. They actually made it so that the feints carried some threat. So that as the fight went on, he was getting more reactions out of Aldo and was able then to build longer and more impactful attacks. Here, like, Adesanya is a great feinter, but it was pretty clear here he did not know how to build off his feints. Normally he does it so well, but he was not confident enough to establish the threat. So Romero just got away with ignoring 90% of Adesanya's feints for the entire fight. And yeah, like, to me, it just, like, psychologically or optically, like, it just made Adesanya look bad. It was sort of like
and it made Romero's strategy work better.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Romero was there to be a catch and pitch counterpuncher. He was there to wait until Adesanya committed to something.
Yes.
And throw back hard. And Adesanya was clearly too spooked out to do anything but look for the outside angle and the outside low kick.
Yeah. It was like that moment in the Silva fight where Anderson just backed up to the fence and Adesanya didn't have, like, the gumption to go over there, to walk up to him and hit him. You know, it was like, well, he's trying to counter me, and maybe that should have presaged what was going to happen in this fight a little more. But Adesanya, when faced with that sort of situation, knowing that someone is just waiting to hit him, he did not think, how can I draw out the thing he wants to hit me with and punish him for it? He didn't think, how can I get in and not give him the opening he's looking for? He thought, no, I'm not going to do that. You come off the fence. No, you come off the fence. And that was basically 25 minutes of this fight. Was, no, you do it. You go first. And then
the capped off by both of them complaining vociferously afterwards.
Yes, they both look terrible in the post-fight interviews.
And both like doing the posturing thing at the end, just at the end of the fight when they knew it was safe, was like, it was real bad. I mean, we have to say, like, this was also a terrible performance from Yoel Romero.
Of course,
he didn't do anything to change a fight. There was also no real reason to assume that he was losing. Like, apparently, all the stuff about him, he's now like jogging around to show how good to show how unhurt his leg is, or he was doing press ups after the fight. All supremely annoying.
Did he actually do that?
Apparently.
Because I was just going to say, like, Israel Adesanya's post-fight interview was very much in the vein of doing push-ups after a fight in which nothing happened. It's like, no. You're supposed to carry that energy on the mic, or you're supposed to do those push-ups after the fight's been insane. You know what I mean? to show that you still have more and that you're willing to continue giving it if only you've been given the chance. Not, you don't do nothing and then say, I still got plenty in the tank, baby. It's like, yeah, no shit. You didn't use any of it. Yeah, if it feels like I'm being much harsher on Adesanya, I think, he asked for this matchup. And this was a completely uncharacteristically bad performance. Again, your comparisons, Phil, to the Silva fight for Adesanya, spot on, just more exacerbated than I would have ever expected. I think also the comparison, like Romero was trying to do what he did to Rockhold. He was trying to build that pressure as the fight went on, but Adesanya actually has better footwork, and so he just couldn't easily track him down.
Also, at least, like, Romero jabbed with Rockhold.
Yeah. Well, Adesanya didn't jab.
Like, I guess there was no, like, he only really wanted to throw when Rockhold was throwing with him. So
and if
I
that's
guess if you just,
if that's your approach as Adesanya, if you're going in there thinking, well, Rockhold got jabbed when he jabbed with Romero, then you are conceding that you're as bad at kickboxing as Luke Rockhold. And you're not. That this is why, if it feels like I'm being very hard on Adesanya, it's because I know he's better than that. I think it was a disappointing performance from him. One more thought. Obviously, this is an entire first segment. We plan to talk about both the main and co-main. We'll see how this episode actually shakes out. What, someone, I think Nathan Cohen, on Twitter, he kind of raised the point that Adesanya has never been, a persistent jabber. I don't actually know if that's true. A jab has certainly been a part of his arsenal. Do you think it's fair to say that we shouldn't have expected Adesanya to do anything like what Bobby Knuckles did to Yoel Romero, given those long stretches of open time and space?
I mean, given that this was an atrocious way to fight Yoel, we just gave him credit for being smarter than this.
Yeah, anything would have been better than this, right?
This one of the major, one of the things that we thought we could rely on in this fight is at least, like, Romero's going to take round one off, and Adesanya's going to win it. And Romero took round one off
and won it.
Still won it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that whole, like, getting the reads early and then testing them aggressively in round two, that's very typical of Adesanya. He didn't get any reads in round one. Like, there was nothing for him to build off of. He needed to go out there and actually touch. So, yeah, that's the thing. Maybe he's not, he's never been a dance around and work off the jab kind of fighter like Bobby Knuckles can be. He's usually free to just ply his whole kickboxing skill set. But, he can jab. So the fact that he was faced with a defensively sound, totally inactive fighter and didn't think, if I poke this guy with my safest possible punch, each time planning to get away at an angle immediately after I land, just to see how he reacts, like, how did he not think to do that once? Just touch him with your jab and dance away. See what happens. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Not a great performance. Very, very disappointing fight. Still interesting. It means something.
Yeah.
I will still take a bad fight that means something over a lot of the usual chaff. But let's take a break, because when we come back, we are going to get to talk about the co-main event. Zhang Weili defended her title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. This fight, as Phil said, was close, difficult to score, but not at all for any of the same reasons that the main event was difficult to score. It was easily one of the best fights of the year so far, if not the best fight of the year so far. Probably the greatest for Joanna Jędrzejczyk in a career full of all-time great fights. And it'll be a lot more fun to talk about than the main event. So we're going to hit that and then move on to next week's Lee versus Oliveira card after this break.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are still talking UFC 248. We're really bad at figuring out how much time it's going to take us to spend on each fight, Phil. Or maybe it's just I'm really bad and you just quietly allow me to be bad.
Yeah, I should cut you off. You're starting to ramble.
I never do that.
No, never.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for protecting my fragile delusions. Yeah, well, we wanted to talk about the main and co-main at 248. Turns out that when it comes to like talking shit about a bad... Huh?
That's enough.
Oh, okay.
Rambling again.
Take it away, Phil.
No, you don't. I don't want to have the stress of being the intro guy.
We thought we would cover both these in the first segment. Turns out when it comes to like talking shit about bad fights, Phil and I have just as much to say as when we are praising good fights. Fortunately, we get a bit of both though. As I said, Zhang versus Jędrzejczyk. Sensational fight. I will let you take it away, Phil. Introduce me to this instant classic of a war.
This fight was incredible.
Yes.
And kind of uniquely incredible. It has to go down as one of the best MMA fights ever, I think. Regardless of gender.
Sure. And
I think, especially because it has a very particular tone and style to it that it's uniquely of its time and of its weight class. And we were talking with Tommy Elliott when he was on the show about how fighters and even great fighters mold themselves to their weight class and the possibilities and the metagames and the sort of the underlying style of that weight class.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a fight with a kind of greatness which only really could have been possible at 115 and women's strawweight, because in pretty much any other weight class, the people involved would have gotten knocked the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a pace and a level of sustained violence, which I think, we just wouldn't really have seen anywhere else. Because the flaws in this fight, that sometimes there was some arm punching from Joanna, or the defense kind of sometimes wasn't there for both of them, particularly in the pocket, ended up just elevating the level of violence.
Oh, yeah.
Because it wasn't anything like a Lawler Condit or a Lawler McDonald or one of these kind of famously violent fights, which tend to have a slow opening movement and then kind of pick up until they're just, at full blast. This was like a math metal song. This was just strikes and strikes and strikes and strikes and strikes for the whole 25 minutes. This was the Meshuggah song of high level MMA fights.
Yeah.
And it was fucking awesome.
There was 20 seconds of creepy atmospheric intro, and then it was just non-stop time signature changes. And the length was appropriate too for a sort of mathcore band. About 25 minutes long.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It was a great fight of its division, for sure. Now both of us picked Joanna. I did feel that Zhang probably edged the fight watching live. I haven't really taken to it with an eye for rescoring it since then, because it was a kind of fight where I'm not going to be upset whichever way the decision goes. As you said before, like just as close as the main event for entirely different reasons. Both fighters felt like winners here, as opposed to both fighters feeling like absolute losers in the main event. I thought Zhang landed the more powerful shots in rounds 1, 2, and 4. That fourth round really shocked me. Like, I think we probably both said that the best parallel for this was maybe the Namajunas fight, the Namajunas rematch for Joanna. And it really, really felt like that. Specifically in that there was a moment in round 3 where Joanna started to really take over. You know, like that was, I think, the first round of the fight in which Zhang started strong and then clearly faded. And that coincided with Joanna sort of figuring out that Zhang was uniquely vulnerable to her southpaw stance, even though Joanna herself, I think, as we saw, doesn't really have as many options from that position. Kind of runs out of ideas and eventually just defaults to going back to orthodox, where she can actually work off of her lead hand rather than using it as her left as her power punch. But at that moment, the body was being worked. Zhang was much more static in front of Jędrzejczyk, forced to trade with her rather than choosing to counter her, and eating a lot more shots, more cleanly. And at that moment, I thought, oh, I'm so glad I picked Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Like, if I were live betting in this fight, at that moment I was thinking, beautiful. The odds have just swung in my mind to favor the former champion. This is what she does. And then just like Rose Namajunas, Zhang held it together just enough to have at least like a minute and a half of frightening offense at the start of each of the next 2 rounds. The fact that she was able to get herself back into the fight at all, I really thought that was the beginning of her fading, of having put too much power out there early, gone too hard trying to knock Joanna out, and then putting herself in a fight where now she had no choice but to continue exchanging or else just be overwhelmed. And as it turns out, she recovered remarkably. The other thing, though, is that she kind of figured out how to change the tone of the exchanges. This is something that I noted last week. Zhang's not much of a left hooker. Historically has not been. It's the left leg and the right hand. Those are the big weapons. And in round 4, she figured out that she needed to trade left hooks with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Something I was saying live, watching the whole time. I was like, man, if Zhang had a good left hook. Joanna just, the way she fights, she throws herself onto her front leg, and after that point, it's arm punches. Her head stays there over the front leg. The weight does not transfer back. Even when she ends a combination with a left hook, which is ostensibly the punch that's supposed to put you back over your base and get your head out of the pocket again, she stays on her front foot, which is why Namajunas and Shevchenko were able to tag her with counter hooks, because she's just there for them every time if you can withstand her entry and fire back. And Zhang was not really doing that for the first 3 rounds, and then in round 4, she started to crack Joanna with big left hooks in the exchanges, and kind of just kept herself in the fight as a result. It was wild. Like, she rose to the occasion. This was a Joanna type fight. She has a tendency to bring the best out of her opponents. She pushes everyone she fights, but Zhang really, really impressed me. Whether you think she won or not, she absolutely answered the call.
Yeah, because that was the crazy thing about this fight, is that the pace and the intensity and the violence of it is that you were just like, it was a display of sheer will on both sides, yeah. Which is difficult to think. It's difficult to think of any other matchup which has really matched it. Because you were just watching it at some point, you're just thinking, one of these people is going to break.
Yep.
And they just never did. Zhang, as you said, she looked like she was fading. Her corner had to pick her up and carry her over to the stool like halfway through the fight.
That was after the second round.
And then Joanna was basically getting led through the realms of science fiction as the fight went on. Like, she went straight from Klingon through to Mars attacks. I mean, this was again, like, it just felt like either one of them was going to fall apart at some point, like Joanna physically or Zhang just like because she'd never done this before.
Yeah.
But yeah, just an absolutely remarkable fight. And yeah, it exposed some of the weaknesses of both of them. It showed, I think, that Zhang can probably. I think I probably scored it for. I scored it for Joanna. I think the other thing about Zhang is that while she visibly punches harder than Joanna does, she also got shocked by punches and kicks more than Joanna did. She's still not as seasoned. Like, you could see that when they were throwing in the pocket, there was no doubt about who could outpunch who. But if Joanna caught her off guard, she was essentially much more likely to get caught off guard and then to just be like, what the fuck was that? Like the spinning back forearm that she took. Like, there was an expression of shock which you didn't really necessarily see from Joanna. So yeah, I mean, she's learned how to throw a left hook. That was about as incredible a baptism of fire as you're ever going to get, as long as it didn't take too much out of her, because it was an insane war. Like, it establishes her as like an incredible champion to watch, and hopefully like a big star in China.
I believe it put her over Shevchenko on the pound for pound rankings. Which I think I saw Danny Martin posting about that on Twitter. Let's go ahead and check. Let's see if they've been updated. Let's find out live how happy I am going to be for the rest of the week. Women's pound for pound. Yes, Nunes, Zhang, Shevchenko. Well earned. Well earned, I say.
People put a lot of weight into being undefeated, eh?
Yeah, and just recent performances.
Yeah.
But hell, it was better than Shevchenko's fight with Joanna. It certainly was.
Yes.
That's
true.
It took a less self-assured, younger, more reckless version of Shevchenko to have this kind of fight. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk just before we move on from it. I mean, we could just sit here praising it. What were the key sort of factors in how this fight played out, or maybe to look at it another way, what would you change maybe in either woman's performance, going forward? For me, I'll let you go first. Anything you would change about either Joanna or Zhang's performance? Any weaknesses you saw exposed?
I think, I'm going to steal your point from when we were talking about this before the show, is that I think Zhang picked up on most of the things she needed to do throughout the course of the fight.
Yeah.
But Joanna definitely could have served to kick more and to lead exchanges, because Zhang still has that tendency to just fall forward onto her right hand as she's closing the distance.
Yep. She gets really square when she's punching too.
Other than that, Zhang was doing a better job of being a lead hand fighter in general, even before she started picking up on the left hook. Just continue to work on that. I mean, Joanna, I think, has more problems because she is more the fighter that she's going to be at this point.
Right.
She's not going to learn head movement. She's not going to be able to sit down on her punches after, she's not going to be able to learn to sit down on her punches after the first strike.
After the 1-2.
Yeah. So what about you? Did you see any other routes to victory for Joanna?
I still kind of feel the way I felt last week. Do you think she fought too aggressively? I kind of do. Yeah, which is funny, right? Because that was something I wanted more of when she fought Rose Namajunas. Would have been perfect. Just punch your way into that clinch and just make her work, make her feel the strength and put the pressure on her. That is, Namajunas has always been uniquely susceptible to that kind of tactic. Zhang clearly is not. You know, even though Joanna, I think, started to get the better of the clinch exchanges as the fight went on, Zhang is comfortable there and she's strong. She doesn't start to, her confidence is not shaken by someone getting in her face and trying to outwork her. So there was not a path to the clinch, or there wasn't like a path to success in the clinch like there would have been against Rose, and yet Joanna was actually getting to that range, and fighting more aggressively than she did against Rose, which is sort of a bit of a bitter irony there, I think. I think some of her best moments in this fight, as they often are, were her counter kicks. Joanna's a very good counter kicker. When she can stay at long range and get her opponent to kick at her legs, she's pretty damn difficult actually to land those kicks on. She's really good at getting her legs out of the way and stepping back. She's got a great sense of distance. And, she had a lot of moments where she would just, let Zhang kick herself out of stance and then punish her with a hard low kick or a hard body kick. There was that one where she kind of stunned her, but just with the toes on a high kick as Zhang was trying to throw a left low kick, I think. I think that's a real strength in Joanna's game. And, Zhang is not, she's not, I think it's still true that there's not a lot of like inherent depth to her technical game. I think that's a bigger factor if you stick her at a range where, she can't just make up for any lack of depth by punching straight through whatever you're trying to do. Where it really does become a game of timing and technique and feinting. How well can you hide your strikes? How well can you evade strikes? How well can you counter? That stuff matters at kicking range more than just sheer strength and speed do. And so I think Joanna could have won that fight more comfortably. Specifically too with the front kick. She was throwing a right front kick to the body that worked really, really well, basically whenever she threw it. She's got long legs. Zhang was not able to counter it. She was making bad decisions in how she was trying to catch it that might have exposed her for some high kicks as the fight went on. And it was a body shot. It obviously would have been very useful to keep her at kicking range and to tire her out a little more as the fight went on. And it takes advantage of the fact that Zhang gets really square when she's trying to move forward and throw punches. And Joanna just didn't throw it very often. More and more as the fight went on, she was just trying to box Zhang up. And yeah, I would have liked to see more kicking range, more kicking game. But that sounds dangerously close to complaining about how the fight played out, which is not at all what I aim to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think even though it is traditionally a dog shit stat, I would be interested to hear. I would actually be interested to have a look at the whole who was advancing more in this fight, because it really did seem like it was Joanna most of the time.
Yeah.
And Zhang was playing the back foot kind of punching in combination game, slightly Korean Zombie-esque.
Mm-hmm.
That she would wait for Joanna to attack and then would come back with 3 or 4, and then Joanna would be stuck. She would be stuck exchanging, as she is, probably only too happy to do, but it's at significant risk of just getting outpunched. And sort of needed in those exchanges, the only thing that could really save Joanna was that if she either landed a perfect shot or if she managed to punctuate the end of a combination with a kick.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I thought Joanna.
So yeah, it would have been interesting if she could draw her onto her shots more. But
absolutely,
I'm not sure if she's temperamentally suited to that because she's so salty.
That's the thing, is that Joanna has adapted more and more into an out fighter, more of a back foot fighter. But maybe we may have missed a bit how much that was a factor of just the kinds of fighters she was fighting. That she was more aggressive against Shevchenko and she was more aggressive against Watterson. She was not as aggressive against Namajunas or Andrade or Kovalevich or Gadelia because they just insisted on coming forward. And Zhang, she was more patient. She allowed Joanna to lead, and given that kind of opportunity, Joanna, given space, she is going to try to fill it with volume. So yeah, it would have been nice to see maybe a little more tactical fight. I say this as a person who was rooting for Joanna Jędrzejczyk The fight we got was absolutely perfect in every way, so I honestly wouldn't change it. Just advice for a potential rematch. And I would not mind seeing them run this fight back, although they might each benefit from an easier fight in the interim, because it was a war. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, moving on from UFC 248, there was other good stuff on this undercard. Beneil Dariush. Our buddy Shuram was very, very happy to see long back Benny get another career highlight knockout. First James Vick, now Drakkar Klose, two of the most disgustingly beautiful knockouts I've ever seen, from a guy who's not really known as a knockout puncher, but when he gets them, man, are they tasty. Very happy to see Beneil Dariush just being a tough, gritty veteran who now destroys people who are too confident about their ability to knock him out. The Leech, of course, contracted Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos' chronic illness, where the first stage, as you said, Phil, you do really, really well and get better and better. And then you just go have a fight at some point where you just start making awful decisions and throw the fight away. And now Neil Magny has it. So all the improvements.
He had the career best performance.
Yep.
Followed by, no doubt, looking like absolute crap in his next fight.
Yep.
Like Lee and ZDS before him.
Yep. Neil Magny, his doom is coming, so take solace in that, Leech fans. But we're not going to talk anymore about this undercard. We're going to move on because Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira are slated to fight. Demian Maia and Gilbert Burns are slated to fight. Renato Moicano is finally coming back against Damir Hadjovic. Johnny fucking Walker versus Nikita goddamn Krylov. All of that we can manage. All of it. After this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, that's the goal.
How much sadness do we want to pack into our Kevin Lee versus Chucky Olives pick?
As much as we can manage.
Okay.
Should we just jump in?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. The question Phil just asked me before the segment began, how much sadness should we pack into our Kevin Lee versus Chucky Olives pick? Why do you say that, Phil?
Because we're not going to pick Kevin Lee to win, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems like a rough one for him. And I would love to see Kevin Lee win. I still really like Kevin Lee. I think he's been a consistently super entertaining fight to watch. I enjoy his I enjoy the fact that he's both like brash and confident, but also like a very frank and candid guy, and that he's he really wants to be he's doing his very best to be a genuinely like skilled, well-rounded MMA fighter. He is a thoughtful person who is trying very, very hard to maximize some not inconsiderable physical gifts.
He's also the sole Bernie brother in the UFC, so
yeah, I
like that.
Yeah, so as a Bernie brother, he's doomed to get to this to a big stage, and then suddenly collapse in heartbreaking failure.
Are you implying that the Athletic Commission is backing Charles Oliveira, Phil? Okay, this has now become a political conspiracy podcast.
Yeah, no. So I think the main problem here is there are ways for Kevin Lee to win this fight, but they involve him walking through the fire, and I'm not sure I can trust him to do that.
Yeah.
He is a tough, dogged guy who can follow a game plan, but I'm also not convinced he is going to be given the right game plan because he is working with TriStar.
That's a very good point.
If there's one thing TriStar tends to do is that they tend to have overly one-dimensional risk mitigation game plans.
Yes, an overabundance of caution is never the right idea against Charles Oliveira, who just feeds off of weakness.
Yeah. and specifically the idea of strike grapplers and grapple strikers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's still a fairly like reductive approach, which I am reasonably sure they're going to try and leverage here, which would mean like Kevin Lee is going to try and jab Charles Oliveira from range. And because fights such as, we've seen fights like Lima McDonald where Rory just went for takedowns over and over again, or Shields GSP, where GSP did not mix up the takedowns on Jake Shields at all.
Yep.
Because everyone was just like, well, Jake Shields might just guillotine you.
Because given an opponent who only does one thing determines that you should have a game plan in which you do everything except the thing they do.
Yep.
Or do everything in your power to stop them doing that one thing. Yeah, it is it can be effective, but it is a weirdly, it's a self-limiting approach to countering specific styles.
Yeah.
The game plan should not be built around you just not letting it shouldn't be built around what you don't want to let the other person do quite so much. It should be more about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Not to just lean on the vaunted wisdom of Conor McGregor, but he was absolutely onto something back when he said that losers focus on winners and winners focus on winning. That is a good approach to have. Don't base your approach entirely on what you're worried the other person might be most successful with. Figure out how their game works, but then you have to leverage your game into the cracks that you see. You have to make them make mistakes. You have to exploit their weaknesses. You can't just be like, this is where they're good, I'm going to cede that phase to them. It doesn't always pan out. Since we're trying to cover a bunch here, broad strokes, if Kevin Lee were to win this fight, is there a parallel on Oliveira's record? It's probably Paul Felder.
Yep, that's the one.
And if Kevin Lee loses this fight, who's the best parallel on his record for Oliveira? It's probably Tony Ferguson.
Yep.
Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, although, as I said, I'm scared that they're going to they're going to try and make Lee run a sprawl and brawl game plan on Jackie Olives, because Jackie Olives has the most technical submissions in the UFC. He's got the most. He's the and as a camp, they've just historically been terrified of submission threats.
Yeah,
they really respect the guard for some reason.
And that's the thing. But
both MMA, but this is the risk mitigation for Charles Oliveira is that you have to the safest way to fight him is to march through the fire.
Bully him. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just go up to him and do not let him rest. You have to, the David Tamor fight of Oliveira's was super impressive to me. I mean, the trio of eye pokes that Oliveira took in the first minute of fighting, a minute which actually took 9 minutes to play out because there were so many breaks and pauses. That was absolutely the kind of incident that would have knocked a younger, less experienced Charles Oliveira out of the fight. He would have folded, I think. And he didn't. The fact that he didn't was very impressive. But I do believe that a factor in why he did not fold is that David Tamor played a back foot game. And when Charles Oliveira thought, I'm going to go out there and beat him up, Tamor immediately went evasive. So Oliveira got to spend the entire rest of the fight after that eye poke walking Tamor down, and he is increasingly dangerous as a pressure fighter, increasingly good with his cage-cutting footwork, increasingly thoughtful with his strike selection. Still not much of a combination striker or even very good when he does try to throw combinations, really gets out of position, but he picks his shots better than he ever has, and very importantly, he is becoming almost as good as a long fighter as he has for some time been a tall fighter. Where he actually, that Tamor fight was so impressive because of how many times Oliveira let Tamor throw his right hand or let him throw 1-2 and just watched the punch miss. Didn't move, didn't leap back out of range, didn't let the pressure off for a second, just judged the distance and said, I'm safe here, and watched the punch fall 3 or 4 inches short. That is a scary prospect if you are going to be forced onto the back foot, knowing that the mere suggestion that you might land punches, which so often saves MMA fighters, just half the time, if you just throw punches off the fence, you're going to relieve some pressure. That didn't work for David Tamer. And I kind of suspect you're right. I kind of think that Kevin Lee is not going to be aggressive enough here. And if he fights off the back foot, Oliveira is just going to build a head of steam. And that is never a good thing to allow him to do. So, yeah, I'm taking Chucky Olives. You in agreement, Phil? What's going on?
Oh, yep. Sorry, I was on mute.
He's muted himself.
Yeah, got to agree. Got to pick Oliveira, probably almost certainly by stoppage. He's just an incredible finisher. I will say, yeah, Kevin Lee not only needs to be aggressive, he needs to wrestle. He needs to just be like, you know who's the best grappler in this fight? I am the best grappler in this fight. If he gets submitted doing that, whatever. In fact, this is a dynamic which has led to Charles Oliveira losing many fights because he's been like, I'm the aggressive fighter in this, I'm the aggressive grappler in this match.
Exactly.
And he shot awful takedowns from his knees and got guillotined 3 times.
And if you're worried about the fact that Tony Ferguson was able to submit Kevin Lee from his back after Lee slowed down, you just have to look at Oliveira's fight with Paul Felder. It wasn't that long ago. He does not respond the same way to the kind of power that Kevin Lee put on Tony Ferguson's chin for the first few guard exchanges. Chucky Olives does not withstand that kind of punishment the same way Tony Ferguson does. It affects the way he fights. I agree. Aggressive
Lee
and take him
remains
down.
a horrific ground and pounder.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, it's an amazing fight. Incredibly jazzed for it. I am fearful for Kevin Lee.
Same. Doesn't mean he can't win it. He's big. He's strong. He's good at everything, but it does really feel like it hinges on whether or not he takes the cautious approach that might seem smart, or the actually smart approach, which is genuinely more reckless. We'll see. We know he can. You know what I mean? Like if Kevin Lee came out like he did against Barboza, perfect. Just nonstop pressure. That would be perfect. We'll see. Okay, co-main event. This one is one just designed for you and I, Phil. We really are masters of understanding jiu-jitsu. We've both done it, I think, combined between the two of us. We probably have 5 or 6 months of BJJ experience under our extremely white belts. We really should have brought Tommy Elliott, or maybe we should get Ben Cohn on here one of these days for grappling heavy. Maybe we'll try to get one of those guys on next week if these many grappling heavy matchups on this card turn out to be really worth revisiting. But this is an interesting one. Demian Maia, once again on the 3-fight winning streak. The man lost to 3 welterweight champions in a row, Tyron Woodley, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, either future, former, or at one time briefly interim, but still 3 championship caliber fighters. And then he just comes back and fights slightly worse fighters and just starts beating them again. He's still Demian Maia. Gilbert Burns, on the other hand, has looked fantastic at welterweight. Better than I ever expected to see out of him. Like, it really does feel like another Dustin Poirier type of situation where he just was not confident as a lightweight, like maybe wasn't getting to spend as much time. There's a genuine trade-off when fighters spend a lot of time focused on cutting, and a lot of mental energy is committed to cutting, and it drains the amount of effort you can put into getting better as a fighter. Gilbert Burns in his last 2 fights has looked so comfortable. He's looked so confident. He's looked quick. He has not looked any less strong. He's been difficult to take down. He's been still smart in exchanges. He's looked strong in the clinch. His game has just kind of blossomed at 170. So I'm really excited to see this. I don't know. I think Gilbert Burns could absolutely do, in my mind, a counter grappling type game and have success against Demian Maia. I think a big question is, do you think he will avoid the ground game with Maia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think pretty much everyone does. I think that's what the one thing. No one has really conceded that they can fight Demian Maia on the ground.
Yeah. Gunnar Nelson tried.
Exception, yeah, and he got absolutely torched.
Yep.
With the exception of, at points, Jorge Masvidal, and that was Masvidal at his most, just kind of, fuck it, let's go.
And Masvidal is secretly one of the best grapplers in the sport, I think.
As Maya said, that's the best grappler I fought in the UFC.
Yeah, he is a super well-rounded fighter with depth in every phase. Absolutely. So yeah, you expect Gilbert Burns to just kind of strike with Maia. If he does that, you think he can win? You think he can stop Maia from getting to him? Like, it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the closest analog for someone like that is not a particularly good one, because it is Gunnar Nelson, who is a remarkably not the same takedown fighter as Demian Maia. And there were some hairy moments in that fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, partially they were because Burns went for stupid takedowns himself. He went for like an outside trip on Nelson, who converted it into who then just kind of stepped around it and turned it into his own kind of ugly double leg. But yeah, I think that was Burns just being, because Burns really likes striking.
Yeah.
I get the feeling, he's one of those guys, he clearly enjoys striking a lot, and they're just going to train sprawl and brawl for this fight. And I think he's proven that he's I can't remember him getting out wrestled by anyone at any point. Like, he's been, wait a minute.
He's a pretty
Michel
stout.
Prazeres. What happened in that fight? He must have. Okay, that's the analog here then.
Oh God! Quickly watch the entire Michel Prazeres fight.
Blocky, muscular men fighting. So yeah, but I mean, the thing is that Maia has come back, but he's come back against typically pretty forgiving style matchups.
Right.
Lyman
Rocco Martin
Good.
was potentially dangerous, but Rocco Martin, when he loses, it is because he just gets sort of swamped with grappling.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically the Jorge Masvidal fight again.
Yep. Lyman Good, exactly the same thing.
Yep. And Ben Askren is...
And then Ben Askren.
Is Ben Askren.
Yeah.
Yeah. that was
so
a fun jinx.
I think Maia has, I think some decline from Maia has been cloaked by some forgiving matchups. And yeah, I just think Burns in particular, like, just gonna low kick Maia a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't really fought any dedicated low kickers who can stop takedowns.
Very successful for Masvidal when he did it.
Yep.
He savaged Maia's leg with low kicks. And yeah, Burns is generally a pretty stout defensive wrestler. More than that, he's a good clinch fighter, and more as his career goes on, he's very, very good at finding strikes on breaks as well. So there's a lot of room there to disincentivize the entries rather than just stopping them, which is better. Maia, we know, is just going to chase takedown after takedown. If you make him pay for those takedown attempts, you're only going to have more and more success as the fight goes on. And presupposing that Burns chooses to sprawl and brawl, it feels like he can win. All right. Now, which of these should we talk about first? We're going to hit them both quickly. And man, there is so much more on this card. I'm telling you guys, this card is so good. I don't know what happened. It might be the best Brazil card ever. It's a really good lineup. We're not going to have time to talk about, like, Trinaldo Magdesi. We're not going to have time to talk about Kunchenko versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Hanayaya versus my boy Enrique Barzola. We have to skip all of these. The two we have left to talk about that we have room for, Jussier Formiga versus Brandon Moreno. Fascinating, potential passing of the torch kind of fight. But before we get to that, I think we should really hit a fight that was made for us, Phil. It was really tailor-made for us and this show. Johnny Walker is fighting Nikita Krylov in what will surely be a light heavyweight masterpiece. And how the hell do you figure what is going to happen in this mess of a matchup?
Yeah. This fight rules, I have to say. Wait a minute. How's the silliness, how's the light heavyweight silliness bracket going? Who won? It was, who won last time? It was, Jimmy Crute. The winner should get Jimmy Crute.
Against Oleksiejczuk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, winner of this fight, Jimmy Crute.
I'm down with that.
Hell yeah.
So
Johnny Walker is still just a random explosion of violence. Yeah. Like we've never, throughout his meteoric rise and his subsequent grammatically correct meteoric downfall.
I was going to say similarly meteoric downfall, meteorite downfall.
We've never really seen anything apart from a knack for weird high octane violence. Nikita Krylov, as you mentioned, might be uniquely well suited to surviving against Johnny Walker, not because he has any kind of defense, but because he's just super dumb tough.
He's insanely durable. We looked at his record before. The only knockout or TKO of his career was in his first UFC fight at heavyweight against Soa Palele, and it was exhaustion more than anything else. Krylov just couldn't get up. It was one of the stupidest fights ever. And, he wasn't knocked out. He just could no longer defend punches because both guys were exhausted. It was an absolute mess of a heavyweight fight. A Deprestus classic. Otherwise, he has taken shots from the likes of Jan Blachowicz and Oven St. Preux and Ed Herman and Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He's taken big shots, including his whole pre-UFC heavyweight career, and never been knocked out. And I think that's probably enough. Who did Johnny Walker beat? They're pretty good wins as far as light heavyweight wins go, but knocking out Misha Cirkunov, okay, that happens. We know. We've seen it before. We saw Volkan Oezdemir do it. Khalil Roundtree, again, totally a thing that happens. Guy gets way too tense, flinches, and you hit him at the right time. That's a very light heavyweight result. Otherwise, fighting insanely durable people, Enrique Da Silva was probably his best performance, and Da Silva is way more of a mess with no ability to adapt than Nikita Krylov, who at the very least can absorb a million shots and then hit a stupid takedown and do a dumb submission. And that's my prediction.
Yes.
I think Nikita Krylov by dumb submission. I think he's gonna Americana Johnny Walker, or he's gonna get him in a 10-finger guillotine or something silly. He might Von Prue him.
Yeah,
that would be a dream come true.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate passing of the torch for Krylov to be just saying to the man that he beat. Just to be like, I got this now, Sensei. I'm going to be the weird, random finisher gatekeeper for this division.
Just picturing a
Rest
meme.
easy. Easy, OSP.
Nikita Krylov is looking up OSP's figures in the clouds. He says, you watch the heavens, and I'll watch the streets.
Yeah, I mean, Krylov isn't a good wrestler or a good striker, but he throws a ton of strikes and he's very enthusiastic.
And he can compete at kicking range. That's genuinely an asset against Johnny Walker, who's big and long.
Yeah. How did that OSP finish actually come about? Did he actually out-wrestle OSP, or did he just, reverse a takedown?
Who's that? Krylov? I don't remember.
I think OSP just got desperate with the wrestling and then, shot a terrible shot and then got out-grappled on the floor.
That's right, because Krylov was winning that fight.
Krylov double-legged him.
And then just ended up on bottom. That's beautiful. But that's the thing. Yeah. Whether it makes sense or not, Krylov will try to wrestle. It does make sense against Johnny Walker. And Johnny Walker's game is just, like you said, it's just a series of barely connected explosions. I think the terrible metaphor that having tested it and failed, I probably shouldn't repeat it now. But what I said before was that Johnny Walker's he's like a mech, like a battle mech, but it's just like a bunch of guns and bombs and stuff just duct taped together, just sort of clacking around, barely strung together. And all you have to do is just take a pair of scissors to the right spot and the entire thing falls apart. It's all offense, no defense. And when I'm saying that in comparison to Nikita Krylov, you know that there is a stark gulf between offense and defense, because Krylov is the same damn way. But at least he is mentally and physically durable in ways that Walker never really has been. Okay.
Yeah, this card is great.
It's awesome.
It's just it's got so many different flavors of stuff. It's got a legitimately great lightweight main event.
Yeah.
It's got a veteran versus up and comer in the co-main. It's got the return of Kanato Moicano.
Yep.
And then it's got an insanely dumb meme fight, which is the best thing you could hope for from light heavyweight. And just skilled veterans, cool prospects. It's so good.
Do we want to say a couple quick words about Formiga Moreno? We don't really have time.
If we're going to break them down really quickly, we should say quick words about both that. I mean, Trinaldo Makdessi. Do we want to say? We can briefly say it seems like a real tough matchup for John Makdessi.
Yep.
He's super small. He is a really jabby TriStar-esque fighter, and they've never been particularly good at dealing with southpaws, and he's just going to be having to close down someone who has just a huge size advantage, a big power advantage, and who could probably hit takedowns on him as well. And Makdessi has just never been a good grappler. Good
enough footwork on Trinaldo's side as well. Good enough footwork and counterpunching to prevent the aggressive pressuring Makdessi that we've seen in some of his recent performances.
Yeah, he clobbered Chad Laprise, and I think that's probably going to happen.
Yeah, Makdessi is, as I looked this up before, he's the first opponent since Ross Pearson of Trinaldo's to not have equal or a reach advantage on Trinaldo. There are not a ton of lightweights whose arms are shorter than Trinaldo's, and Makdessi is one of them. So, not a good look for him. Trinaldo's probably going to win that. Quick words on the flyweight one. This one, I think this has potential to be a torch passing kind of fight, because for all that Brandon Moreno Formiga can probably sucker him into takedowns and clinch entries, and that probably favors him. That Moreno can walk into counters. And even if he is a very good grappler, the fact that he has been out grappled by the likes of Askar Askarov at stretches, it's never a good look against Formiga. You need to be Joe Benavidez to scramble out of Formiga's back control. Otherwise, you're Davison Figueiredo, and you spend a whole round stuck there the moment he actually clamps onto your back. But conversely, if it comes down to bringing the aggression and the violence, the layered offense on the feet that allowed Joe Benavidez to beat Formiga after scrambling out of those back mounts, Moreno can do that. He showed hugely improved boxing in his last fight against Kai Kara-France. He feinted, he jabbed, he built off the jab, he worked the body, used the left hooks to the body to set up his left hooks to the head, his footwork, his defense. He got cracked and dropped in the first round of that fight, and it didn't affect him at all. He was insanely confident and just got more competent as the fight went on. So if he can bring that same kind of aggression, we have seen Formiga overwhelmed before. So that sets him apart from the likes of Davison Figueiredo, but the takedown defense is probably not up to snuff.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, I think the best path for victory for Moreno is Ray Borg, but he has less athleticism than Borg, just less pure explosion, but he's a much better striker.
Yeah,
at this point. But then again, I think Formiga is a much better striker than he was when he fought Borg, and that's a credit to how well Formiga has fought. I mean, much as I would still selfishly like to see Joe B get another title shot, and even if he got knocked out in his last fight, if Formiga wins this fight, they should really give him a fucking title shot.
Yeah. I mean, he's got to win over the champion,
Yeah.
In one of his last two fights, he beat the guy who without the weight miss at least would now be champion. So.
So yeah, I also tend to. So yeah, the thing is, Moreno gave up way too many takedowns to Askar Askarov and had to scramble out of them for me to believe that he can beat someone whose game is as cleanly and cleverly put together as Formiga's. Like Moreno has still absolutely shocked me because he's gone from a diabolical performance against Sergio Pettis to looking like a legitimately good range striker. I mean, it's one of the biggest turnarounds that I've seen. He looked totally lost in that fight. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still ready for him to shock me. And he's still a good and he's still an incredibly opportunistic finisher, which was basically what got him to that title shot in the first place. But now he's shown he can win rounds as well.
Even getting taken down by Askarov, like Moreno, typically when he wins, he out-grapples people. That has always been, he's been a crazy brawler on the feet, and then people grapple with him, and it's like, oh shit, this is the thing he's really good at. So let's not forget that now that he has shown to finally have seemingly finally figured out a boxing and kickboxing game that works for him. But I would have to see him do something like Joe Benavidez did before I would expect it to happen, and I certainly do not expect him to submit Jussier Formiga. So it's a good one. It has potential to be a big surprise. It's a meaningful fight, and this card is just littered with fights that are in one way or another meaningful and well made. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So yeah, if you've missed a million fight night events over the last year or two, just don't miss this one. This one is actually worth tuning in for live, and I'm going to try to do that myself. And that's it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. We went long, Phil. Who could have predicted it? But there really was like an embarrassment of material to cover. Just so much to get through. And next week's card is not bad either. So we're finally picking up. We're warming up into the year. The lineups are looking more interesting. It's been fun to talk about. Come at us on social media, folks, with your awful, ill-informed opinions, if you so desire. You can find Phil on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson and me at Boxing Bush, B-U-S-C-H. Phil, do you have a preview coming out this week on Bloody Elbow?
Do indeed. I think we're just going to be hitting Lee Oliveira, but I'm still looking forward to breaking that down again because it's such a fantastic fight.
Cool. I will maybe be working on something this week, but in absence of plugging that, I will just say go check out my article from last week if you missed it. I believe I called it How Israel Adesanya and Yoel Romero Read Their Opponents' Minds. It's about how these two fighters identify and create openings and exploit them later in the fight. A fun contrast of styles that maybe didn't actually apply to the way their matchup panned out, but is still relevant to how these two fighters generally operate. And I was pretty pleased with how it turned out. So go read that one if you haven't already. Check out Phil's preview with David Castillo on Bloody Elbow. Make sure you tune in next week. We're going to be recapping Lee versus Oliveira and looking forward to Tyron Woodley versus Leon Edwards. And otherwise, that's about it. Thank you all so much for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.